Yachanti Deva Sunvantam Naswapnaya Sprahayanti.
Our third speaker of the session is the amazing vocalist and musicologist Srimati Vrinda Acharya, who presents her paper titled The Non-translatables of South Indian Music.
Namaste everybody. This is my third paper presentation on the SI platform, and today I'm extremely happy and honored to be presenting my paper on the non-translatables of South Indian music. Next slide. It is well known that the core concepts related to our knowledge systems and art forms are mostly Sanskrit terms. I shall try to refrain from using the word Sanskrit because I feel the word Samskrita itself is a non-translatable. These Samskrita terms have profound meanings and often deeply embedded in their cultural frameworks. They have very deep spiritual, metaphysical, scientific, historic, and cultural significance that makes it almost impossible to find corresponding words in any other language, particularly a foreign one like English. In fact, the so-called equivalent terms are not only highly incapable of representing the originals, but also lead to dilution, distortions, and sometimes even demolition of the intensity and the profundity of the original concepts. And this has been beautifully brought out by Sri Rajiv Malhotra in his book, Being Different. Next slide. Unfortunately, there has been a tendency of translating and mapping such concepts and perspectives onto Western framework. Western scholars often come up with this well-known argument of sameness. And most Indians who are either naive or take great pride in being westernized in their thought and conduct easily subscribe to this sameness principle and go on to say, oh, it's all the same. How does it matter? Everything is the same. In this way, the dominant colonial culture gradually and subtly imposes its own superficial translations of the weighty concepts, which the natives of the colonized culture also conveniently adopt. So in this way, Dharmic aspects get loosely, badly, wrongly translated, which leads to serious loss of meaning, and this eventually aids the undesirable cultural digestion and appropriation. Thus, it is extremely important that the Samskrita terms are retained in their original authentic forms and they are associated with their origins. The non-translatability of Samskrita terms is extremely important for the non-digestibility of Hindu tradition, cultural practices, knowledge systems, and art forms into the Abrahamic framework. Next slide. There are several such common examples of non-translatables, like Dharma is not equal to religion, Atman is not equal to soul, Guru is not equal to teacher, and several other pure Indic concepts like Varna, Samskara, Karma, Prana, Mantra, which do not have any equivalence in the Western vocabulary whatsoever. Next slide. In my paper, I have dealt in detail about the inimitable nature of Sanskrit language, which is indeed the bedrock of our Samskriti, Samskritihi Samskritashrita. So it is this unique nature of Sanskrit language due to which we have to worry about retaining the Samskrita terms in their original forms. Basically, Samskrita is a language based on sacred sounds and vibrations realized by rishis through spiritual practice. And it's a language that's quite special and different when compared to other languages. Samskrita vocabulary is amenable to etymology. Every word that is used is well defined. Words and their meanings are derived from roots called dhatus. And there is a very logical and methodical grammatical process that follows before the words are finally formed. So the words, the meanings of the words are very meaningful and not just random customary sounds. Next slide. Talking of the non-translatables of South Indian music, I could have as well called it non-translatables of Carnatic music, but most of the concepts and terms that I'm going to take up are applicable to Indian music in general, but analyzed from the point of view of Carnatic music. Karnataka Shastriya Sangeeta is the present evolved form of the ancient music system of India, known for its sublimity and uniqueness, and stands apart when compared to other forms of music across the globe. It is not just an art form, but a complex music culture and a divine music culture that is fundamentally integrated with its Vedic Sanatana Dharmic roots and with the Hindu culture and ethos. The various raga, tala names, technical terms, and the nomenclatures have significance spiritually and metaphysically, and they're essentially non-translatables since they are invariably tied to Sanatana Dharma at various levels and cannot be translated to any other language. But it is not a good thing that the entire gamut of Indian musical terminology is being denoted by simplistically, shallowly, supposedly equivalent English terms, even in books written by Indian musicologists and commonly used by Indian musicians as well. This may be due to want of better terms, but nevertheless, the translated words do not do any justice to the original words. Next slide. The purpose of this paper is to identify such concepts and technical terms, to understand what they essentially convey and signify, and to show how they are intertwined with the quintessence of our musical culture over the centuries, and also to analyze if the English words used in place of them are in any way close to the original words. Next slide. I have taken up 12 major technical terms related to Indian music. Nada. The very first paribhashika pada that any student of Indian music learns is nada. Originating from the primordial Om or Pranava, it is the all-pervading eternal musical sound of the universe from which originates all being and speech. It is the minutest atom-like sound. I must confess here that though I am trying to prove that nada is not equal to sound, I am forced to use the very same English word because I am explaining in English, and that makes it almost inevitable. It is identified, nada is identified with the bindu, and it is something which is nitya and anirvachaniya. It is nada that gives rise to the shrutis, and these give rise to swaras, and these again to ragas. The speciality of this Indian concept of nada is that in India, God is conceived of as Nada Brahman, the embodiment of nada. And through nadopasana or sangitopasana, one can attain celestial bliss. This is a pure Bharatiya concept, and it is India's contribution to world thought. Nada is often plainly translated as sound. Sound represents only shabda. Shabda not in the sense of a word, but shabda as in sound. No doubt, nada is also basically sound, but any sound cannot be considered as nada. Only a pure musical sound that is perceived in the aforesaid philosophical background can be considered as nada, and no such concept is found in any theory, any book on the theory of Western music. So it can be considered as a non-translatable. Next slide. Coming to Shruti. Shruyante iti shrutayaha. Anything that which can be heard is a Shruti. And it is a most subtle and minute nada that is audible to the ear. It can be defined as the least difference between two consecutive swaras. In principle, though Shrutis are infinite, Indian music recognizes 22 Shrutis distributed over a sthayi or swara saptaka. Semitone in Western music is defined by the Harvard Dictionary of Music as the smallest interval in use in the Western musical tradition. There are 12 such intervals to the octave, that is between two pitches with the same pitch name. So it is very clear, semitones are 12 within an octave, but Shrutis are 22 in a sthayi. Western music also theoretically recognizes microtones and quartertones, but that is only theoretical recognition because it clearly says the smallest interval in use is only a semitone. However, in common parlance, in common use, we normally say, what is your Shruti? Now, in what Shruti do you sing in? In that sense, the word pitch or tonic can be considered as an equivalent to Shruti. But the original concept of Shruti, when we are talking of the conceptual Shruti, semitone is not equal to Shruti. Next slide, please. Svara. A nada having a definite single frequency is termed as Svara. Svato ranjayati shotra chittam sasvara uchate, says Sangeeta Ratnakara. It is the Shrutis which give rise to the 7 swaras. By default, a swara is called as a note. But it is interesting to note that both note and swara are not the same. The Harvard Dictionary of Music says, a note is a symbol used in musical notation to represent the duration of a sound and when placed upon a staff to indicate its pitch. More generally, the pitch itself. So from this definition, it is clear that a note generally means the pitch is in an octave. Okay, so there's no difference between, there's no difference between a note and a pitch. But in the Indian musical tradition, Shrutis give rise to swaras. Shrutis are 22, but swaras are 7. So there is a clear distinction between Shrutis and swaras. So using note as an equivalent for swara might not make that much of sense. Next slide. Raga. This is extremely difficult to fit it in this time because Raga itself is such an elaborate topic. It is the pivotal concept of Indian music. Indian music is termed as Raga Sangita, and Ranjayati iti Ragaha, Ranjyate anena iti Ragaha. As early as 6th-7th century, Matanga says in his Brihadeshi, Yoso dhvani visheshastu swaravarna vibhushitaha ranjako janachittanam sacha raga udahritaha. So it's rather difficult to define raga in clear, precise terms because it's a highly abstract concept. We can say that it's a combination and arrangement of series of swaras in a particular sequence with a definite relationship to the fundamental Adhara Shadja. But the crux of the raga is its melodic personality and individuality beyond its arohana and avarohana, that is derived from what we call as the signature sangatis or the characteristic phrases of the raga, which have been refined and defined over centuries of evolution. So ragas are considered as aesthetic identities which indeed have to be deeply experienced and felt rather than intellectually explained. Melody. Is melody equal to raga? Harvard Dictionary of Music defines melody simply as a coherent succession of pitches. Melody is opposed to harmony in referring to successive rather than simultaneous sounds. It is opposed to rhythm in referring to pitch rather than duration or stress. It only says melody is different from harmony and rhythm. Other than that, there is no clear definition of melody. And this sounds a bit too primitive and definitely doesn't come anywhere close to our concept of raga of the Indian music. Next slide. Mela. Mela is a system of scales formulated in Carnatic music to organize the ragas. It is the proud innovation of the South Indian musical tradition, inspired by which the North Indian musical tradition, Hindustani music, they devised the thought system, which is only a miniature scheme of 10 thoughts. But however, this is practically alien to the European musical tradition, which apparently does not have any recognized system for classification of musical scales. So if one has to understand Mela, it has to be as Mela only. So there is no equal word for Mela. Next. Laya. Is Laya equal to rhythm? Let's understand what rhythm is. Going back to the Harvard Dictionary of Music, it says, rhythm is set beside the terms melody and harmony. And in a very general sense, rhythm covers all aspects of musical movement as ordered in time, as opposed to aspects of musical sound conceived as pitch and timbre. So when you ask them to define melody, they will say it is opposed to rhythm. And when you ask them to define rhythm, they will say it is opposed to melody. Beyond that, there is nothing. And then it says, rhythm denotes a patterned configuration of attacks that may or may not be constrained overall by a meter or associated with a particular tempo. So from this it's very clear, rhythm is very gross, is the most gross, simply keeping to a beat, for which there may or may not be any logical explanation. There need not be meter, there need not be tempo, nothing. It can just be as it is. Next is tala. Tala is also basically rhythm, but it is well defined and represented in the form of cycles called avartas, comprising specific number of beats or aksharas. And more subtle than tala is laya. Etymologically, it is derived from the Sanskrit root, li shleshane, which means to merge with or to be absorbed in. So you have a word called manolaya, so that is the kind of absorption. It is a highly subtle concept which is beyond tala or rhythm, but it encompasses both. Laya can exist without tala or rhythm, but not vice versa. Okay? And again, this is a very, it's like a formless form. It is highly intangible and abstract like the raga, and it has to be experienced rather than explained. Next slide. Kala is not equal to speed. We normally say first column, second column, third column. There is a system of geometric progression there. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32 and so on. But speed is a very, very generic term which only means slowness or fastness. So when we teach students first speed, sing second speed, I'm always wondering, should we use this term? We should stick to Kala because speed cannot represent Kala adequately. Next, Gamaka. Gamaka is undoubtedly the heart and soul of Indian music, particularly Carnatic music is what it is today is due to its Gamakas. It means gamayati, atmanam gamayati, prapayati. It is that which moves by itself. It is any usage or experiment of handling of swaras which is aimed at beautifying the raga and rendering oral pleasure to the listener, thereby bringing out the artistic skill of the musician. In other words, it is the graceful turn or curve or stress or shake or corner touch that is given to a swara or group of swaras that emphasizes the melodic individuality of the raga. No doubt, Western music also uses effects like legato, staccato, vibrato, etc. But the usage of these effects is very limited, since basically the system of music in Western countries is harmonic, and they do not very well correspond to the intricate gamakas of the Indian music system. Next slide. Sangati also has no equivalent. In the context of Raga Alapana, Sangati refers to musical phrases that portray the multiple shades and nuances of the raga, whereas in the context of a Kriti, Sangati can be understood as the successive step-by-step musical variations of a certain chosen lyrical line, with the degree of embellishment and complication gradually increasing. And such a concept is practically unimaginable in any non-Indian musical culture. So Sangati adds to the list of non-translatables. Next slide. Manodharma. In fact, improvisation is not such a bad translation, I would say, but it is incapable of getting the complete essence of the word manodharma. I think I will skip this because of lack of time. Next is rasa, which is commonly translated as emotion or sentiment. Rasa is said to be the ultimate goal of any art form from the Indian perspective. Bharata says, Nahi rasadrite kaschidartha pravartate. So without rasa, any artistic attempt that has all the necessary ingredients, but without rasa, it is a futile attempt. Rasa generally means rasyate asvadyate iti rasaha, that which is relished or enjoyed. And the technical definition given by Bharata is vibhava anubhava vibhichari samyogat rasa nishpattihi. Rasa, which is translated as emotion or sentiment. Emotion or sentiment can be considered as an equivalent term for bhava, which is already there in the minds of in the hearts of the sahridayas or the cultured connoisseurs. And once they engage in beautiful music, dance or literature, the kind of rasanubhava they get, the bhava gets transformed into rasa. And there is no word to signify what this rasa is. Sentiment or emotion is only bhava, which is already there. But for rasa, there is no equivalent term. Next. Vagyakara is not a composer. Vak cha geyam cha ete karoti iti vagyakaraha. Sahitya and the Sangeeta, Matu, Dhatu are of equal importance, and for a Vagyakara, his Rachana is the result of an intuitional flash which happens spontaneously. His Rachana is a product of divine inspiration, the first emergence of which is consummate. He sings as he composes and he composes as he sings. But the word composer, in the Western context where Sahitya is almost of no significance, a composer is only one who composes the music or just a tune. And often his composition is well thought out, and it is a product of conscious effort. And coming to compositions, Carnatic music particularly has a rich treasure of compositions, different kinds of musical compositional forms like Jatiswara, Swarajati, Varna, Kriti, Devarnama, Tillana, Tiruppugal, Pada, Javali, and so on. And for all of this, there is probably only one term, and that is composition. So mother's brother, father's brother, aunt's husband, the next door neighbor, everybody is an uncle. So there is no difference practically. So this shows the dearth of vocabulary in English when it comes to representing the ideas of various facets of Indian culture. Next slide, I conclude. I have tried to make a list of, an exhaustive list of non-translatables. Since Raga is non-translatable, Tala is non-translatable, Laya is non-translatable, Manodharma is non-translatable, all the other aspects of Raga, all the Tala Dashapranas, all the various Manodharma aspects, Raga Alapana, Tani Avartana, etc., they are all non-translatables. Conclusion, thus it is evident that a poor translation is not just of the word, but of the whole lot of wisdom that it embodies. There is an acute need to preserve these non-translatables of Indian music in their most authentic forms to ensure that the undesirable loss of meaning does not sooner or later lead to loss of wisdom and the obvious appropriation and digestion that follows. We all know that various elements of Hinduism and its culture, like Carnatic music, Bharatanatyam, have been assimilated into the Christian history and dogma. The non-translatable campaign is an important step towards counter-attacking this conspiracy and protecting our Dharmic wealth in the long run. Thank you.